This portion of the John Fredericks Show is brought to you by Hargrave Military Academy. Attend an educational and informative open house event at Hargrave Military Academy in Chatham, Virginia. For more information, visit online at hargrave.edu. Hargrave Military Academy. Build his future.
Got an election coming up in, 6 days, November 5th. Be there, be square. Registration is already passed, but you got to show up and vote. Talk is cheap. Got to vote. Got to make your choices. A lot. Everybody's up. All the House of Delegate seats are up, plus 3 state offices. One of them, Lieutenant Governor. And joining us now is the Democratic candidate for Lieutenant Governor of Virginia, and also the state senator from the Norfolk Eastern Shore District. He's also a doctor. Dr. Northam, great to have you with us.
Good morning, John, and it's always great to be on the show. I hope you're doing well.
I'm doing fine. I got 6 days before the election. Most surveys now showing that you extending a lead over your rival, E.W. Jackson, the Republican. But a few months ago, this thing was pretty close. Now you're pulling ahead. Of course, the only poll that matters is the one on November 5. Everything is, all the others just give people like me something to talk about. But what do you think has been the real separating issues, Dr. Northam, in this campaign?
Well, I think we've been, crisscrossing this state, putting a lot of miles on the vehicle and listing a lot of folks. And, on the down ticket, John, the challenge is, people knowing who we are. And certainly the governor's race has gotten a lot of attention. But I think people are starting to pay attention now to our race and the Attorney General's race. And, people realize that I've been in the Senate since 2008 and have been able to get some good things done, the smoking ban in restaurants being one of them, working on concussions in our student athletes. But, the most important thing right now, John, that I think people are focused on is someone that will represent Virginia and work with both sides of the aisle and really, at the end of the day, do what's in the best interest of Virginia. That's what we need. I've got great relationships with both Republicans and Democrats, and the Senate, traditionally is a very collegial body. We're there to get things done. So I think people realize that that's what I bring to the table, the experience and just the relationships I have, and I think that's why we're seeing my margin spread a bit.
Dr. Northam, I want to talk about Medicaid expansion in Virginia now. This is going to be decided when the new session is convened in January. There's a lot of Republicans that are now jumped on the Medicaid expansion bandwagon. They cite conservative Republican governor in Ohio, John Kasich, as a reason for that. But here's one of the issues that, as a doctor, I really want you to weigh in on. According to the surveys that we have right now with Medicaid in Virginia, about 22% of doctors don't take it. They don't participate. Some think if there's Medicaid expansion in Virginia, that number could grow. You're a doctor. Is that a real risk of this thing?
It certainly is, John, and that's a great point that you bring up. And a couple of points I would make. One is a big part of Medicaid expansion has to be reform. I mean, we have to find ways of cost savings because it's just the costs of Medicaid are getting away from it. So, I wrote the budget amendment along with Senator Favola up in Northern Virginia, and there's some good reforms in it. One of them is, going to managed care Medicaid. Another is that these individuals that the expansion would affect would have co-pays. So there are a lot of things that are built into the expansion that will actually, at the end of the day, save Virginia money. But the second part of it that is so important, and I can tell you this just because about 52% of my patients are Medicaid. We are about 48th, 49th. Doesn't really matter when you get to that level,
right.
But 48th, 49th in the country on Medicaid reimbursement. So what that means is that a lot of providers choose not to take Medicaid because they essentially lose money every time they do. So a big part of the expansion has got to be to deal with the reimbursement rates that providers are receiving, or else these individuals are going to continue to go to the emergency room because nobody else will take care of them, and it's going to, be very expensive. So, with the money that we'll have coming into Virginia as part of the expansion, I think that one of the things I want to do is work with our governor and work with the Secretary of Health and say, look, we've got to take care of the reimbursements or else this isn't going to work.
And how much money is that? I mean, what do we, just put it in general terms, if you would?
Well, as far as money in the expansion is, over the next 10 years, I'm sure you've seen the numbers, but it's billions of dollars with a B, and certainly to change the reimbursement rates is going to cost money. But it's something that has to be done. A good example, John, I think it was like 7 or 8 years ago. I don't know the exact timing, but dentists their reimbursement rates were changed to the point where now they actually have incentive to see Medicaid patients. And again, we need to do the same thing with medical care.
Right. Now, if you were to change that, though, like the numbers that everybody's focusing on is real numbers today. For instance, even if the federal government did pay for all of it, and then they're going to pay for 90% of it, well, that 90% turns in the 10% under the existing reimbursement turns into something like $200 million. So Republicans are saying, well, how are we going to pay for the $200 million? Where are we going to get that money? But if you reform it and increase the payout, then that $200 million could be $300, $400, $500 million. Then what?
Well, we have to go over the numbers, John. But the reform will actually save money. Let me give you a real quick example. We used to have what's called straight Medicaid. In other words, if I saw a patient, I'd bill the state of Virginia and receive payment for that at some point. Now we've gone to managed care Medicaid. So there's a middle person company, for example, Amerigroup, that oversees the care of the patients, make sure they take their medicines, get to their appointments, etc. And what they've found is that even with a middleman, there are significant savings because those particular patients aren't going to the emergency room. They're not having to be admitted, having all the tests done, those types of things. So that's a reform. Again, another reform part of it, some of the transportation issues of how Medicaid patients get to and from their doctors, that's certainly part of the reform. And finally, these people that are part of the expansion will have copays. So again, over time, I think what people will see is that we will save the Commonwealth of Virginia money rather than, have more financial responsibility. So
the objective in reforming then Medicaid would be to find cost savings. So rather than the money that the Virginia General Fund would have to contribute would go down rather than up. Is that what I'm understanding?
Exactly, John. And just to make the point maybe a little bit better, is that in order to save cost, we have to have people covered. When they're not covered, those are the individuals that you don't have a provider, nobody's overseeing their care, and they end up going to the emergency room in what I call a crash and burn, scenario, and that is very, very expensive. So if we can get those folks covered, then we can control the cost. That's the only way to do it.
That's going to be the key item. Dr. Northam, this race has really turned on women's issues in a lot of ways, and you got two sides of the argument. There's a lot of women now saying that, the Republican ticket has been too intrusive. There's others that are saying, hey, you guys are basically trampling on life. This is turning in, some people say, to one of the most pro-choice tickets ever. A lot of money is coming from outside groups. How do you respond to that? I mean, as a doctor, you got to deal with children all the time. How do you kind of respond to the charge that you guys are, that the ticket as a whole now is, some say, radically pro-choice? How do you respond to that?
A lot of my patients have epilepsy, and they end up sometimes having unintended pregnancies. And I think what we all can agree on is that the less abortions in our society, the better. And I do my best to talk to my patients, to tell them that there are other options, adoption, families helping to take care of them, etc. So nobody wants abortions, but the problem that we've been dealing with in Virginia for the last 2 years is that the way to decrease abortions, at least in my opinion, is through education and through access to health care. It shouldn't be legislators telling women what they should and shouldn't be doing with their bodies, and also telling providers such as myself. Those are decisions that need to be made between the doctor in the patient. So I think that's what women have found so offensive. They, they don't want abortions, but they just at least want to make the decision themselves and do it with their doctor, their families, etc. So I have a lot of Republican friends, as you know, and we've had that discussion. Just it shouldn't be the government's role to be telling women what they should and shouldn't be doing, and they need to stay away from that. And I think that's what women have focused on. That's why they're so involved in this race, and I think they're going to show up at the polls on November 5th.
I'm going to go a little personal angle here. I just want you to share this because I think it's interesting. In your practice, one of the things that you do is you manage care for children in hospice. If you really think about that, I mean, that's a very tough thing to do every day that you've been able to do. It's got to change your perspective. I mean, you got to have a different perspective than somebody like Terry McAuliffe, for instance. When you're going in every day and you're caring for children who are in hospice who are dying. I mean, how does that mold Ralph Northam's perspective on politics and everything else?
Well, John, I appreciate the question, and it really has put my life in perspective. I've been the medical director of Edmark Hospice, which is right there in Portsmouth, and I've done that for 14 years on a volunteer basis. And so currently, I oversee the care of about 65 to 70 terminally ill children, and it's been a very sad work, as you might imagine, but also very rewarding in that a family would put their trust in me at that time of their child's life. And I have witnessed a lot of things in my life, John, but I don't think there's anything more devastating to a family than the loss of a child. So as you just said, it has put my life in perspective. If I think I'm having a rough day, which we all have good and bad days, I just think of these families, what they're going through, and it's it just at the end of the day for me, it's not that big a deal. So it's been rewarding. I want to continue to do it, and it's a tremendous service that Edmark Hospice provides to Hampton Roads. So, again, there's nothing more difficult than the loss of a child.
Yeah, I would think at the end of the day, with all these negative ads flying around, some of them from your own campaign against E.W. Jackson, obviously, and some way that we've seen in the governor race. If you win and Terry McAuliffe gets elected governor, you need to maybe take Mr. McAuliffe to your clinic for a day and have him walk through and talk to some of these children. That might put things in perspective for him or whoever is a governor of the state as well.
Yeah, John, when Governor Kane was in office, I took him by Portsmouth, and he got to meet some of the families, and I think it really left an impression on him as well.
I think so. We're out of time, Senator. We want to thank you for joining us today. Do you have a final message? We're going to try to have everybody on one time, but do you have a final message to anybody that might want to get more information or involved in your campaign?
Well, I just encourage everybody to go vote on November the 5th. That's what democracy is about. But what I'd like to say, John, is my wife, Pam, said to tell you hi. She has been on the campaign trail with me, and as you know, she knows a lot about education, wants to do something about these SOLs, and also continue her work to clean up the Chesapeake Bay. So hope we'll be a good ticket together.
Well, we always enjoy getting her involved, and you can tell that I quit smoking, and I'm on my 5th month, so that thing's gone. It's dead. It's put to bed. I'm good to go, and I've also lost 25 pounds. So hey, life is better than it was when I was smoking a pack a day. Thank you, sir.
Well, that's great, John. We're proud of you. So keep up the good work.